Welcome everyone. This is our video to look at workshop 4 for CSP. This is the final workshop of the year for teachers and our last time that we are going to officially see them at a code.org workshop. Because we've shifted around material, this workshop doesn't compare directly to any workshops we ran last year since it covers material that's a little later in the unit. So taking a look at our first session here, we have a workshop opener. It's 40 minutes long. Again, this is used to check in on pacing, let teachers talk about what they need to talk about. We're specifically letting them reflect on pair programming and using teaching strategies to teach programming because that's what we talked about in workshop 3. And then we also want them to share stories about students who have surprised them. And that kind of connects to our next session. Our next session is this blind spot session. This is run very similar to what we did at our facilitator event last May. It provides teachers an opportunity to kind of tie up some of the conversations we've been having around equity. So we want to address the inequities in classrooms, and part of this is being able to identify one's own role in inequity in the classroom. So kind of our main idea here is for teachers to be able to identify and address equity gaps in their classrooms and schools, reflect on how blind spots impact the classroom, and then consider next steps in increasing awareness to blind spots. In our facilitator event last spring, all facilitators who attended participated in a blind spot session where we thought about how blind spots affect our facilitation. Here we're asking teachers to think about how blind spots affect their classroom. This also ties up some of the things we've been doing with scenarios in the workshops. Those scenarios tie back to like what are your blind spots or what are your assumptions you are making as soon as you have a little situation happen in your classroom or hypothetically happen. It's important to note that this leads right into a break that is intentional. If you need to check in with any participants, or maybe if participants need to just go for a walk or grab a snack, it's kind of a nice way to transition back to our regular content. After break, participants engage in a previously on, so we talk about what happened in chapter 1 of Unit 5 and talk about what happens in the first 2 lessons of chapter 2. This is kind of getting people geared up for the model lesson, but it's important to note none of the content covered in the first 2 lessons of the chapter are really needed for the model lesson except for the notation of the plus plus. To increase a variable by 1. So that's the only piece of content they need for the model lesson, but we still want participants to know what's happening in all the lessons in chapter 2. The model lesson is going to be on an introduction to arrays. Again, we're focusing on teachers' roles in this lesson and how they can vary up classroom instruction based on the lessons that are provided. So your role as the teacher in the model lesson is outlined in the agenda, but we make decisions such as watching videos together and talking about what happens. You make anchor charts ahead of time that are revealed during this model lesson that can be posted around the room and used as resources while people are working on levels in Code Studio. We're utilizing pair programming again. It's important to note that we don't think pair programming is required every single time students are programming, but we made the decision to almost over model it in the workshop since we know teachers tend to dismiss pair programming as a strategy, so we want to overemphasize it a little bit in workshops. It's not expected that teachers use it all the time. Also, as a teacher, you're going to be looking for good pair programming mindsets and debugging skills, making sure people know where the resources are, helping them think through solutions, not just giving them solutions. And then we close the lesson by looking at an app together and predicting where it uses arrays. This lesson about a raise. We traditionally haven't done because it's too late in the year that we haven't covered it with participants, but given that this is our last touch point, and we want to make sure teachers are prepared for this year and beyond, we want to make sure teachers have a good idea of what raise look like and how they can teach the content with a little bit more of an active role at times. Model lesson reflection, we're talking about the structure and talking about roles. So we talk about what are the key beats of the session and how does the teacher's role change within a lesson and eventually throughout the whole unit. In addition to the teacher role, we also look at the student role there. We can expect that as the teacher role shifts, the student role and responsibility will also shift. That brings us up to lunch. After lunch, we do a curriculum investigation. This is longer than our previous ones. We have more time in this workshop, given that the AP content is less than the last two workshops. So we finished looking at lesson 13, which is this introduction to arrays. This is important because in this portion, participants make a My Favorite Things scroller app, and that gets built on in lesson 14. So we want participants to see that these are connected. You can't, if students don't finish 13, they're going to have a really hard time starting 14. And so we want to pull that out. Also, at the end of 13, there's a longer level progression. We want teachers to think about how are they going to break it up? How are they going to make it engaging? How are they going to monitor student progress? How is their role going to change during that level progression? We go on to look at lesson 14, which is a building an app lesson where participants make an image scroller, and then we talk about the first part of the processing array lesson. So again, it's a little bit longer, very focused on arrays. Our goal is for teachers to have a good idea of what an array is by the time that they leave this workshop, and also think about how they can transfer that knowledge to students with using the structure that's already there and embedding some of their own structure. We end the curriculum content here with a conclusions and connections session. In here, teachers see a high-level overview of the rest of the lessons in Chapter 2, and we also talk about the AP connections. In the end, we talk about how they want their role and responsibility to change throughout the course of the unit. There's no right or wrong answer here. Our goal here is simply to get teachers to reflect on what their goals are and help them accomplish that in the classroom. Our last big session is on AP test prep. We know test prep isn't most teachers' favorite part of teaching a course, but we wanted to give them time to think about what they have already done to prepare students, both in terms of content and in terms of testing skills and strategies. After they've thought about what they've already done, we think about what they want to do or what they hope to do, and then have them make a plan from there. So this is a time for them to share resources and strategies, and then put those into action, thinking about, okay, this is how much time I have. What am I going to do with that? For example, there's a good chunk of time after students submit their Explore and Create task before the AP test. So there's some time in there that teachers can think about how are they going to use that time, and how do they keep it still engaging and motivating for students and not dull, which test prep can become. So give them a chance to think about what sort of strategies they're going to use. Last session of the day is a wrap up. This is again the last time you'll be seeing these participants. So we're going to thank them. If you have a tradition or a way you like to wrap things up with the group, consider adding it here. Of course, there's a survey at the end as well. It's a little longer than our average survey just because we want to get kind of some ending data on the workshop. But in general, same sort of idea where we are looking at the question parking lot and taking a survey.